Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Wigtown Area Committee on Wednesday, the 4th of November. Can we have the cedron and apologies, Claire?
Okay, thank you, Chair. We've got 7 members present, 2 of which are on Teams, Councillor Hagman and Councillor Surtees, and of course apologies from Councillor McCammon.
Thank you very much, Claire. Any declarations of interest?
When it comes to the discretionary grants, an interest to declare in the fed-up coffee with a relation that works for the fed-up.
Is that close enough relative, Claire? I'm looking to my governance officer. The interests have to be declared now.
Yeah, it's always, of course, it's up to members what they wish to declare. Councillor Scobie, I'm not sure your mic was on when you made your declaration.
Okay.
Do you want to hear it again? Declare an interest when it comes to the discretionary grants. I don't know how you handle it, but it's on the fed-up coffee one, where I have a direct relation who works for the fed-up coffee. So there is an interest there. Also, you know, and I don't think it's a declarable interest, I've always been interested in the furniture project, and since its inception, through to conception, and have dealt with the community reuse shop, the furniture project, as many in the room have, but I don't think it's needing a declaration of interest.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Chair. An interest in item 8, the application from the Wigtown Trust. A board member of the Wigtown Trust and will take no part in discussion on that item.
Thanks, Jim. Any other members? No.
Chair, I've got my hand up and I've asked to speak. I don't know how you wish to do the Teams meeting, but if I can come in.
You can always come in.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got a declaration also in terms of items 7 and 8 in terms of the Wigtown Trust. Now, if we're going to be discussing those items specifically in regards to the museum allocation within the discretionary grant, then I too will take no part in that discussion.
Thanks, Katie.
Just for clarity, I'm the director of the Wigtown Trust. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. My apologies for not saying good morning to our colleagues from the outflung areas. Good morning.
Good morning, Tommy. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting my hand up or using the chat. I could declare an interest in the Wigtownshire Sports Council for the same reasons that others have mentioned, that I sit on the board as an advisory member. So I will not take part in the discussion.
Thanks, Rose. We now have minutes of the previous meeting, 2nd of September. Willie?
Yeah, Chair, could I just ask if it is a correct record, and I have no doubt that it might be, on page 10, the mover and seconder, whether that is correct. And maybe also to ask, that was a recommendation that went to the new Procurement and Finance Committee, I believe. How did it get on?
Chair, can I just check that was in reference to the 2 community asset transfers that went through the last committee?
Apologies, yes. Under item 7.
Chair. I can confirm that they both went to Finance Procurement Transformation and both were approved there.
I can see him. The minutes are for approval. Do we have a mover? Jim McComb, Davy Engel second. Thank you. We now have Police Scotland Wigtownshire 12-month performance update, 1st of April 19 to 31st of March 20. Report by Head of Safe and Healthy Communities. Who do we have? Sorry. Ingrid?
Chair, I believe we've got Inspector Stuart McComb here to talk about the police performance report.
Yes, good morning. Good morning. First of all, apologies on behalf of Chief Inspector Brian Lee, who was due to present this with me sitting beside him. Just 5 minutes before the meeting, unfortunately, a situation developed that meant he had to drop out, and so I'll apologise in advance for a relative lack of preparedness on my part. As we've done with kind of previous police reports there, it certainly wouldn't be my intention to insult your intelligence by reading through the report, which you can see in front of you. There is a wee anomaly in the report, which I'm sure some of you will have picked up in relation to the difference between the figures in the boxes for petty common assault in the Wigtown area and some of the commentary. I understand that might have been around the timing of the actual meetings and some of the figures that were gathered, and then I think the meeting was put back. But as I say, I can certainly cover that if anybody wants to ask any questions on it. In general terms, the report itself, considering some of the reports we've produced for your attention at times, is relatively positive, I would suggest. There are a couple of things there that I'm sure you might want to ask about anyway. As I say, rather than me talking through it, I would just kind of throw it open for questions. Quite happy to try and answer any questions you've got on the content of the report, or indeed anything else that you think might be relevant. I'll do my very best to answer them, and if I can't answer it today, as I've done previously, I'll go away, research it and come back to you with an answer in due course. So I would essentially just fling the floor open to yourself, Chair, and your colleagues there, if anybody's got any questions.
Members, any questions for the police report? Jim?
Thank you, Chair. Page 18, common assault. I find it concerning that assaults on emergency workers have increased significantly from 24 to 71. Could you give us some of the background to this, please, Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously something that we've been keeping an eye on. That's, to be fair, that seems to have been rising steadily. Perhaps not as obvious a jump as that, but it's been rising steadily for a number of years now, which has been a cause for concern for ourselves. Obviously, we do look into that in more detail to try and understand what that actually looks like in context. Where are these assaults happening? What extent are assaults being carried out to? The vast majority of those assaults, as you can see, are against police officers. You would probably expect that anyway, I would suggest. A great majority of those actually happen within the police station and police vehicles. Again, you might expect that to a certain extent as well. Usually that's when trying to deal with people through the kind of custody process. There doesn't seem to be any kind of great trend. I mean, we look into this in some detail. Is it particular demographics of officers, if you like, that are getting targeted here as well? Is it particular types of incidents that we're dealing with? There doesn't seem to be any great trend in relation to that, other than it just seems to have been a deteriorating picture locally, nationally, and by nationally I mean right across the UK as well. for a number of years, we've just seen more and more people prepared to struggle with assault and fight with the police. Basically, now we can all have our own opinions on why that might be in terms of the way that society is going now and some of the attitudes towards the police. I think, unfortunately, I think there's some kind of national rhetoric and things, and I think sometimes the kind of the media don't necessarily help sometimes in the way that they sometimes portray some of the things that the police are having to do and some of the way that we're having to carry out our business. Now, we'll all have our own opinions, as I say, as to whether that's affected the general attitude towards police as well. I think, personally speaking, I think there are differences now in terms of the amount of times that people are being held in custody, and I would compare that to maybe a number of years ago, where the general kind of assumption was that if you fought or struggled with the police at all, the chances were you were staying in custody for court on the next day. If it was at the weekend, when the majority of these things happened, you were in for the weekend. I think there was a deterrent value to that as well, if I'm being honest, which there's obviously an increased effort nationally that people, less and less people are being held in custody and going to court from custody. For very good reasons, I have to say. You know, there's a myriad of reasons for that. All very good, but I do wonder if the deterrent value sometimes isn't there for some of the people that we're dealing with, who it makes no difference to them whether they end up fighting or struggling with the police, or, you know, the various kind of assaultive levels when they're dealing with the officers. In terms of what happens to them in the long run, it doesn't seem to make a great difference to them. You will see concerns portrayed nationally as well about some of the sentences or lack of sentences in terms of severity and the way that these things are often dealt with in the court. I think that has an effect too, and I think just in general all that adds up to people being more and more likely to struggle and fight with the police, and think, why not? It's quite sad, actually.
No, thanks, Stuart.
Molly?
Stuart, I would congratulate you in the way the report's laid out. It's maybe one of the more simpler ones that I've looked at, and one that's very informative. So whoever the author or the one who composed it, I would congratulate them. I can't
claim credit for that, Councillor Scoville.
You're taking the credit?
No, I can't, no.
It's looking at some of the figures, Stuart, and quickly. On page 20, number of detections for drug supply, drug production, drugs cultivation in Wigtown, and that's gone up by 4. This is an historical document. I see it's up to March 2020. So, you know, on the number of detections for possession of drugs has slightly gone down when the other one has gone up, but it's still relatively staying the same. And going back a number of years and various people involved, we had campaigns against drugs. You know, it's maybe an unfair question. Are we on top of it, basically, the drugs issue, and will we ever get on top of it in terms of society and how youngsters are attracted or induced into drug taking? And the other part of that one is the vandalism and malicious mischief in Wigtown, and that has seen an increase. Could I ask, is there any indication of specific hotspots on that one where this maybe happen and so forth and so on? And have you got the ability and the resources to deal with the issues where there are a number of hotspots, particularly in Stranraer? Aye.
Yeah, in relation to the drug supply figures, I mean, first of all, your kind of general question, I'm no naive enough to suggest that we'll ever be entirely on top of, you know, drugs problems as a whole the way we would maybe like to. That's a never-ending battle. It's a constant battle, you know, not just for ourselves locally, obviously. I think we've got a reasonable handle on the drug situation, but it is a constant battle. these things ebb and flow, both in terms of the types of drugs that are being used, abused, dealt, how that's happening. The figures themselves, as I say, are fairly stable. What I would say is we've always got. We always like to see, if you like, the top figures there about detections for drug supply, productions and cultivation, etc. I would like to see that going up in a way to a certain extent, and I know that maybe sounds counterintuitive, but that shows that we're targeting, I think, the right people, and that we're trying to target those supplying, dealing, producing the controlled drugs. So, I'm not heartbroken to see a slight rise in that, because for me that to a certain extent tells me that we're targeting our resources in the right way. What I wouldn't want to see was a massive imbalance between the detections for the possession of drugs being up through the roof and very little in terms of detections for supply, because that would show me that we're targeting the bottom end of the scale, if you like, and experience tells us that that's maybe not the most effective way of targeting this issue. So I would say that I'm not naive enough to say that we're, sit here and go that we are in any way, shape or form winning the battle against drugs. That's a massive issue nationally. And you get into all these arguments about kind of legalisation and resources and all these kind of things. What I would say is I'm confident that we're standing our height to a certain extent on this locally. I'm confident that we do get a lot of support from the community locally in terms of the flow of information that comes out about drugs, which allows us to contribute towards some of these figures that you're seeing in front of here. I'm confident that the officers, in terms of the resources we've got, are out there doing their best, using the powers available to them, both in terms of stop and search and Section 23 of the Misuse of Drugs Act. They're out doing that, being proactive and trying to address that. There are challenges, and I think we maybe covered this at the last one again, in terms of some of the attitudinal shifts in relation to the drugs away from the drugs that the community saw as the dirty drugs that they were phoning up all the time, heroin, these kind of things. I think cocaine is a particular issue. I don't think that's just an issue in Wigtownshire, that's an issue right across, and that's a shift we've seen nationally, which the flow of information maybe just isn't quite the same about cocaine. The use of cocaine in itself, I think, has an effect on the levels of violence as well, whereas heroin maybe didn't just quite have that effect on the everyday levels of violence. Heroin usually had an effect on the kind of more serious ones, your robberies and some of your acquisitive crimes. So, I mean, I don't suppose they're great figures, but I'm reasonably comfortable that we're plugging away at it, Willie. I mean, I don't know how else I could put it there. Some people will disagree, I'm sure, and as I say, I'm not naive enough to claim it's a battle that we are necessarily winning or ever liable to win, but we're holding our own locally, I would suggest, and doing what we can. I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not sure if there was a very clear answer to that question there.
No, I think that's adequately answered it, Stuart. I would just ask about the vandal and malicious mischief in Wigtown area.
Yeah, in terms of vandalism, that's obviously an issue now. We keep a close eye on that. I actually tasked a bit of analysis into that rise. We keep an eye on these things on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis anyway, but that was clearly kind of concerning because it was quite a significant rise. So we tasked a bit of proper analytical work into that to see if there's anything we could tell in relation to commonalities, as you put it, hotspots. Is there a particular age profile of victims, offenders? What are we talking about here? Are we talking about windows getting smashed? Are we talking about cars getting damaged or scratched? The bottom line is there was no real trend. It's just gone up right across all the different kind of indicators that you're seeing there. Vehicle crime is very, very common. I have to say, there's probably no great surprises. And when you look at that analysis in relation to the times that these things are happening and the locations that are happening, particularly in Stranraer, you could look at a wee map there as we did and look at the hotspots and heat maps and all these kind of things. It doesn't tell you anything that would greatly surprise you. It's predominantly linked to weekends. It's predominantly linked to greater consumption of alcohol. It's predominantly happening in the busier, more populated town centre areas. It's a challenge, vandalism, to be honest. It's one, believe it or not, for a crime that's maybe wouldn't rank as the most serious on folks' lists necessarily. It's one of the hardest ones to solve, because the opportunist nature of it is such, and the ease with which you can do that and basically remain undetected. It's actually one of the harder ones to solve. We've obviously got some kind of tools in our armoury there in terms of, you know, town centres and CCTV and tools that will help towards detection to a certain extent, but it's a real challenge. We do a lot of kind of preventative work, as you know, around kind of inputs and things with right down to kind of school children and that as well, to try and change their attitudes towards vandalism as part of antisocial behaviour, instilling them some understanding of what it's like to have property that you own damaged, or that your family owns damaged, and the impact that this can have on people. There are things we do to try and prevent that. In the way that we structure our patrol plans and things, we do use that information to try and target, to make sure that we've got the patrols in the right places at the right times. You know, to be honest with you, it is a challenge. It's not. The rise you're seeing there is not, it doesn't give you any confidence, I suppose, but it's not out of sync with what we're seeing elsewhere either. You know, that just seems to be the way that things are going nationally as well at the moment. But it's a challenge.
Quickly, Chair, it's just another one on page 18, Stuart, and this is up to March of this year that we've recognised. Total number, Group 1 crimes of violence in the Wigtown area, and it's the narrative to that of the total 55 groups under Crime 1, 11 domestic abuse offences. That's 20% of that 55. And then we had the lockdown. Just projecting, has that figure increased, and are we able to manage domestic abuse, and is it on the uprise, given lockdown and so forth?
Yeah, it's a wee bit. I should have touched on the fact that how far these figures were behind, and as I say, I know we've kind of commented on that before. It just doesn't quite sit comfortably with me that we're now sitting here reporting on figures that were up to March, and we're talking about that 6 months later, because the situation changes, as you know, particularly this year, of course, with COVID and lockdown. So, in relation to those Group 1 crimes, the wee bit of commentary there, just in the paragraph about the Domestic Abuse Scotland Act, and obviously the effect that that's had on it, it's quite a significant effect, and that's you're talking about the Section 1 offence about coercive and controlling behaviour, that as well. You've no figures to compare that to from the previous year, because it's only just been enacted. We're seeing more and more of those offences coming to our attention. As you can see, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know, because I don't have those most up-to-date figures for you. I wouldn't be surprised if that continues to rise, and I would say that because there's an increased awareness of the content of that legislation, both in terms of victims coming forward, and of the police officers through their training recognising that, and then going on to acknowledge and investigate that. So I wouldn't be surprised over the longer term if we see that going up slightly. Again, you could see that as a good thing, that people, you know, they're having the confidence to come forward, and we're recognising that and trying to do something about it. On how COVID might affect that over the course of the lockdown from March to now, and however we see things going over the next number of months as well, I'm not 100% sure. I would say that we were quite concerned, obviously, in looking at trying to predict, if you like, what effect lockdown would have on these things. In terms of domestic abuse, we were concerned that with people being cooped up in the house longer, if you like, that we might see a rise in domestic abuse, tensions rise within the household, for example. I'm not sure that that's quite panned out. But until we actually sit down and look backwards and do an analysis of that, it might not become totally clear. I think what we've maybe seen is there wasn't as much domestic abuse getting reported at times, and whether that's because the lockdown was forcing people to stay together, and that contained unit, if you like, that maybe people weren't come forward in quite the same way, because the view was, well, I'm here, I'm stuck, what else am I going to do? I'm not quite sure on that, Willie, and as I say, I don't think anybody is. We're only going to see that maybe when we get the kind of 6-month, 12-month figures and start seeing how that going through, and then how, once we come out the other end of lockdown, if you like, what effect that then has, you can then put it in some sort of context, if that makes sense. As I say, what I would say in general is those 11 domestic abuse offences, I say, are coercive, controlling behaviour. Those are Group 1 crimes rather than, just to be clear, serious domestic assaults, if you like. So it's just to draw that kind of distinction, because the serious assaults comes into the actual serious assault section. So some of those serious assaults will be domestic, if you understand me. So again, I'm not sure if that kind of answers it. I don't have a clear answer on that, and it'll be some time, I think, before we maybe will.
No, you answered it again fine, Stuart. It's just, that when you look at the figure, that's a 20% of those 55, 11 of those, which is quite concerning, and you've alluded to it. It will be a clearer picture when you get further figures.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at the overall figure of 55, and you consider that 11 of those are these domestic abuse ones, and the other 9 in terms of the cruelty or neglect of children, that's a fair whack of that 55. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to paint that as a good thing, but it's a significant chunk of those serious Group 1 crimes, the most serious of crimes, if you like. So it just maybe allows you to put it in a wee bit of a context. If you talk about the 9 offences of cruelty or neglect of children, which are absolutely in that's the way they're classified, in that group of serious crimes, and they are very serious crimes, there's almost a positive aspect to that as well at times, in that what it means are people are recognising these issues and neglect, and they're flagging them up. They're being reported to police, they're being investigated, and people are being taken to task for it. So there's almost a positive aspect to that as well, in a way. So, yeah, as I say, just maybe to give you a wee bit of kind of context around it.
And I have David Ingalls, and then Katie and Rose.
Sorry, excuse me, Chair. Both Councillor Hagman and Councillor Ross, Surtees have been asking to speak since this item started, just in case you hadn't picked them up on Teams. Thank you.
Very clear on what you
Councillor Hagman and Councillor Surtees, at the start of this item, have requested to be added to the list to speak. Councillor Ingalls came in after them.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, Chair. Yeah, Katie and Ross were in before me. Yep.
Katie.
Thank you, Chair. Strictly speaking, Councillor Surtees is first. If we look at the thing there, is she not? I'll come after Councillor Surtees, Chair, if we're going to go by the speak of who is speaking first. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we should always take numbers for speaking when it's your turn. So is it Rose?
Thank you, Chair. Stuart, thanks so much for this report, and actually a lot of what I'm asking has been covered, and it's really interesting to hear your perspective about the figures that are on the page, and thank you very much for stepping in, and thanks for the report from you guys. This might just be my reading of it, Stuart, but on page 19, under robbery, at the bottom, it says, it should be noted that some large reductions in detection are also the result of our low commission rates. Could you say a bit more about that, Stuart, and what that means and what the implications are as we go forward?
I didn't, first thing I'll say is I obviously didn't compile this report, but my understanding of what they're trying to put across there is that when you're dealing with very low numbers of crimes, any type of crime, there will come a point where you get down to almost a baseline, if you like, where you're unlikely to be able to reduce the commission rate much further. You're always going to get a certain level of crime. when you're dealing with low levels in terms of the numbers of crime there, what you'll find is that I think the closer you get down to that, it can really affect the detection rate. In that, how am I going to explain this? You're going to get down to very kind of low numbers, and then when you're getting down to that, the inability to detect maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 crimes when you're talking about small numbers like that is going to look like a big swing. But when the numbers when the commission rate goes up, if you like, the inability to detect a small number of crimes doesn't actually look that bad. But it's almost like you become a victim of your own success, if you like, when you're coming down to very low commission rates. That swing can be even more apparent when you're looking at the detection rate. I'm not explaining that very well.
No, I think you're helping me get my head round the statement, so that is helpful. Stuart, the other point, just really quickly, is I'm working with the Community Council and residents who live actually in Stranraer Town Centre, and the noise level at weekends, I mean, you've gone through this and you have spoken to this point, but it's the antisocial behaviour mixed with dangerous driving. And the noise that affects the people that actually live in the town. There's some quite vulnerable people who are kind of trapped in their house and can't get out, even at reasonable times of the day. I know Ronnie Boyce, and you mentioned earlier also, the preventative work that you're doing is working, but I think I'm getting further, and I'm sure other members are as well, further reports of large groups of people gathering, car noise, revving, dangerous driving, and that kind of thing. Is there anything that we can do together as a community, working with other groups, to try and address these things with yourselves? Because some of these things aren't on the page, are they? Because they're not really statistics as such. It's just what we know.
Yes, absolutely. As you say, it's not on the page, but what I would say is that's not to assume that it's not something we're very aware of and trying to do something about. As you know, Stranraer in particular, Newton Stewart, in terms of the kind of Victoria Street, Albert Street area as well, has some of the same issues. Main thoroughfares, the actual road layout, the building layout as well, in terms of narrow streets, high-sided, tend to amplify noise as well, doesn't help. The legislation that's open to us, and I know we've been through some of this previously, and Ronnie will have been through some of this with yourself as well, in relation to loud exhaust and the vehicle and use regulations, what we can do and what we can't do in terms of the offences that may or may not be getting committed there. It's a real challenge. It all comes down to a very kind of simple premise, and you could apply this to any number of crimes, antisocial behaviour, all these kind of things that we talk about. If we're not hearing about it, we'll have absolutely no chance of sorting it. If you tell us about it and you encourage the people in your communities to tell us about it, what's bothering, what's troubling them, I can't promise we'll solve it, but we can at least try and do something to influence it. That is a challenge for us sometimes, and we get things there and they're getting reported to us, and then they get flagged up sometimes through elected members, and we're kind of end up going back and playing catch up, if you like, going back to people and go, well, if you told us at the time, or if we could have come and seen you, we could have got a statement, there might have been something we could have done about this, whether it's warning people in terms of Antisocial Behaviour Act, in terms of their use of motor vehicles, if it was to constitute it has to come to a certain threshold in terms of, a Section 3, they're driving without due care and attention, or there's offences in relation to causing unnecessary noise that could have been avoided by action on the reasonable action on the part of the driver. There are some things we can do, but it is very, very challenging, particularly in relation to exhaust noise. We all know there's a lot of drivers these days that are quite happy to fit non-standard exhaust to their cars, to remove baffles for silencers, these kind of things. The effect of that out on the open road's bad enough, but when you're driving down if you're driving down Bridge Street in Stranraer, for instance, that's going to be quite a significant noise. There are a lot of challenges for ourselves and our colleagues in DVSA in terms of how you measure or enforce that, and indeed it's very, very difficult for us as the police to necessarily do something about that. Again, I come back to that point, that's a national problem. This is happening all over Scotland. what I will say is there's no lack of willingness locally for us to address that. You know, and we're happy to hear from anyone and work with them. What we've been trying to do is encourage people to, if you're seeing, for instance, a particular vehicle going round and round the town centre, and it, you know, it's extremely noisy, it's causing you concern, it's stopping you sleeping, you can't open your window, etc., and it's happening all the time, and there really is no good reason for it, then come and speak to us. We can often go and speak to the driver. It might just be a case that they didn't actually appreciate the effect that this is having on the folk round about them. And, you know, having just a word in their ear, you can sometimes help. Sometimes you're dealing with people that just don't care, unfortunately, and then you end up having to look at what, if anything, you can maybe do in terms of enforcement or using the legislation open to you. Again, that's a really hard one to solve. It sounds like it should be really simple, but it's not. There's a whole different kind of raft of parts to that, and it's not just quite as straightforward as you think. As I say, I didn't necessarily want to dominate the meeting, begin into all the kind of nuts and bolts about all the different kind of legislation and things on it. I'm quite happy we can come back to you separately, or Ronnie, who's been, I know, doing a lot of work on that in relation to Stranraer Town Centre, come back and cover that with you separately, but there's a lot to it.
I think that would be really helpful, Stuart, so I'll contact you about that.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Rose. Thanks, Stuart. David? Oh, sorry, Katie, I forgot you again.
Thanks. That's okay, Chair. Thank you. Thanks, Stuart, for the report. So obviously we've had lots of information, so I'm not going to dwell on the things that have already been said. There's a couple of points, and it's something that I bring up every year. I brought it up in September last year. Can we please request, and I appreciate this is not in your gift to say yes or no, can we have more than 1 year's worth of statistics to compare to? And just to give an example, I'm looking at page 18, total number of Group 1 crimes. We're sitting at 55 this year. Last year we were sitting at 38. I've gone back and looked. We were sitting at 22 the year before. So actually that's quite telling that we're on an upward trend, and not in the good way for that one. So again, I would ask, and we have changed the reports. Previous years, we've actually had it broken down by Ward 1 and Ward 2, and now we're just into Wigtown area. So I'm assuming that is 1 and 2 rather than the old Wigtown boundary of the Palmuir Burn. But, you know, again, and I appreciate that's not for you to comment on, but if you could pass back that we would like more information, that would be useful. One of the points I'm slightly concerned, because on page 20, number of detections for drug supplies, having looked back, the figure reported to us last year was actually 27, not 25, which is what's in the report. So I don't know which figure is correct. If that's changed, you know, that's fine, but there's no indication of that. And again, looking back to the previous year, it was 22 the year before. So again, by not having more than 1 year's statistics, it's not giving us an accurate picture of what's going on. On page 22, on the percentage change in terms of road safety and road crime, when I look at drink and drug driving offences, it actually says there's been a decrease, but actually that should be an increase. And also on disqualified driving in Dumfries and Galloway, it says that there's been a decrease of 26%. I'm assuming that's a type error, and that should be the increase, because those stats, excuse me, don't match up. So those are sort of quite technical points. If they could be fed back before the final report goes in, that would be very useful. On an entirely different subject, I was asked at Cree Valley Community Council to bring up the issue of parking. Now, obviously, road safety and road crime is in here, but there's no mention of parking, and on-street parking, the council don't have any ability to issue fines, and that does lie with the police. So I'm wondering if you do have any statistics of how many parking fines the police have been able to issue. And certainly there was a request from Cree Valley Community Council for parking discs. And I guess the question back to you is, if there was a parking disc scheme, would that increase the likelihood of the police being able to issue parking fines? Now, I appreciate there's huge issues in terms of resources, and, you know, there has to be priority done. So I'm not particularly looking for a comprehensive answer to solve this issue, but it was something that the community raised, and I said I would raise it on their behalf to you today. Thank you.
Yep. In relation to, you're right in terms of the layout of the report. I don't have that in my gift to give you, and I know it's something I've asked, and I certainly will feed it back again. The answer I'm given any time I've fed it back previously is that no. If you're wanting to compare year-on-year figures, you'll have to do basically what you've been doing there, which is keep and refer back to the reports that you were given the previous year. I don't have any control over that. This is a sort of national format, and I appreciate that there maybe have been slight changes made with it at points in the past, but I have fed back that same question previously and just get told no, they've been asked before and it's not happening. So I will feed it back again, but I suspect you maybe get the same answer. In terms of the kind of absolute the figures there in relation to the road traffic offences, yep, quite frustrating on my part. As I say, I don't produce the report. And it's embarrassing when you come to speak about an report and there's obvious faults in it. It's not even a technical fault; it's just an obvious mistake. So again, I will feed that back. I can assure you, I share your frustration. That as a guy that has to come here and speak to these figures, and then we keep getting wee errors pointed out in these reports, it's not very nice. In relation to the parking, that is a whole other issue. In terms of the approach that we have to parking, and I know some, if not all of you as elected members, will have contacted us to ask about parking in the past. There's been a lot of discussion on it, not just in Newton Stewart, but in other places as well. Our approach to parking is that, yes, enforcement still lies with the police. The council didn't choose to go down that decriminalisation route. So, yeah, enforcement still lies with us. However, we will not routinely enforce on-street parking offences. We will respond and attend to parking offences where there's a danger or obstruction. That should get reported in via 101. Allows them to, as they say, triage it, to prioritise it in amongst all the other things that are ongoing at that time, and dispatch officers where they need to and where they can. But in terms of, for instance, you're asking there about residents' parking schemes and parking dis and overstaying in parking areas, we will not be routinely enforcing that. We've done a lot of work previously with Cree Valley Community Council, who as Councillor Ingalls will tell you, who raised this a couple of years ago. We did a lot of work through the local community officers there, and indeed the Community Council did a lot of the work to try and encourage a lot of these people that were clogging up the spaces, if you like, in Newton Stewart Town Centre to consider the effect this was having on the local businesses. Unfortunately, what we did find at that time was a majority of those vehicles that were being cited as repeat offenders actually belonged to the local businesses themselves, which is disappointing. But we visited the shops, and the Community Council contacted the shops. We then did follow-ups, education, all these kind of things to try and avoid the point where it becomes what we'd call a persistent community problem, where we're having to then divert valuable resources that could be dealing with a lot of the other things you see in this sheet there to actually go out and stick tickets on people's windows. That's not where we want to go with this. That's a very last resort. Now, the actions that we took in Newton Stewart in particular, as you mentioned there, were pretty successful the last time we did that. And I know PC John Jimison, who deals with the Community Council at Newton Stewart there, the Cree Valley one anyway, has been doing a lot of kind of work and a lot of contact with the Community Council. Gave them some advice and assistance in relation to a letter that they were preparing to actually go out and hand out to people seeking their cooperation in the town centre. That's the way that we're trying to approach these things, in a sort of joined up approach, a preventative approach. Simply speaking, I don't have the resources, and I don't want to have to divert valuable resources towards sticking tickets on people's cars because they're staying in a street too long. It's just no a good use of police time, considering where we are and all the other conflicting priorities we have at the point. And that's not me trying to minimise the issue, because I accept it's an important issue to people, but it's just, if I've got 100 pennies, I can only spend them once and have to work out where I'm spending them. So, as I say, happy to continue to link in with them, happy to encourage people to come forward, and if there are, again, almost like we're talking about with loud exhausts and things there, if there's vehicles that are causing a persistent problem in relation to the way that they're parking or the length of time they're parking or whatever, registrations, come forward with them. We're happy to go and track down owners, registered keepers, and try and speak to them and seek their cooperation. It's often a more effective long-term solution than simply banging a ticket onto somebody's window. Often that's it's not even necessarily a resident or somebody that's doing it again and again and again. Sometimes that can just be somebody that was unlucky and on the day that enforcement was happening, they were one of the ones that got a ticket. I accept that sometimes can send out a message to people. If there's a threat of enforcement, they're less likely to do it in general, but again, it's all checks and balances. There's only so much that sometimes that we can do in this. Looking forward, I don't know what the national picture looks like in terms of where the council sees itself going in terms of decriminalisation or enforcement of on-street parking. I know that it's one of the few councils that haven't gone down the decriminalisation route. There's a very interesting national document on that shows you the picture in other local authorities. Again, that's not within my control. It's probably more within your own control as elected members to influence that.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart, for that. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Stuart, thank you for coming along this morning speaking to the report. Just touch on the parking issue. It was phenomenally successful and the shops really benefited from it. There were 2, possibly 3 vehicles which completely ignored the request to park in the car park, and I think it was felt that examples needed to be made. Now, I don't know if that ever happened. For a while, the comments from shoppers and shopkeepers that I've spoken to were very positive in the fact that they could actually park on the main street and do their shopping. And I think you're right. I think it's the workers in the shops that were causing the main issue, and getting that message out and making sure that it is hammered home to them that that they should not be parking on the main street, that they're blocking it up. It's down to the local community council or whatever. But I think a bit of backup, if the message is sent out that you will be booked if you persistently park longer than you should on the main street, would certainly back that up. A lot of positives in your report. Katie's touched on a few issues that I was going to touch on. I think she's correct in asking for more than 2 years, more than last year and the year before, in order for us to track a trend that's developing. I think it would be useful to have an extra year, possibly even 2 years. A 4-year would give us a real trend-setting graph that we could follow to see where the major issues are and how they're developing. The concern for me, the increase in crimes of violence and serious assault in the Wigtown area and even petty assault are all on the up. However, there's no statistical breakdown of those, and it would be interesting. I think we did get, maybe last year or the year before, a breakdown of where those serious assaults took place and what times they were taking place, so that we could get an idea of why and where they were happening. So it would be useful to have that information within the report. Other than that, I think it's a good report, and appreciate you coming along, Stuart. Thank you.
Yep. In terms of the group 1s and the petty common assaults, I will certainly take that away and I'll have a wee look at. I've got some of that information in various formats, as I say, because it's something we're aware of and something we're looking at anyway. So I'll go away and have a wee look at that and consider what, if anything, I can give you in terms of some context to that. Again, I come back to what we can't do is, and it comes back to why we give it these in a standardised format in terms of the reports. It's to try and make sure that elected members across the area and in different areas in Scotland can expect and receive the same standard and quality information. We can't fall into that trap, and I appreciate that's not what you're asking here, but we can't fall into that trap of going away and producing masses of other information in various formats, depending on where you live in the country, and you maybe get a wee bit of detail here and somebody else doesn't get the same detail. So we're very wary about that as well, and because it's not a case of me going away and spending half an hour looking at the computer doing these things when we ask for some of this more in-depth context things. What we're doing is talking about going away. I have to spend an hour, a couple of hours putting together a request that goes to an analytical department, and they actually have to task a member of staff whose job it is to spend days and days doing this kind of stuff. That's why we try to avoid doing that. But where there are things that are jumping out at me, anomalies or particular questions, as long as I'm not getting flooded with them every time we come to area committee, if you like, I'm more than happy to go away and have a wee look at that and see if there is kind of some context or some kind of answers I can give you. We've done that before, and I'm happy to do that, as long as, as I say, we're not getting flooded with it, because ultimately it chokes up somebody's job at the other end. But I'll certainly take a wee look at that and see what we can do for you.
Thanks, Chair. Stuart, on page 20, the report indicates a significant reduction in shoplifting offences. Do you know if this trend is a counter to the national trend?
I don't unfortunately know what the national trend is in relation to shoplifting. What I do know is that we were seeing a bit of a rise prior to this one in terms of some of the shoplifting offences that were taking place. There was some frustrations, if you like, locally in terms of Wigtownshire that we were experiencing in terms of some of the stores that were seeing themselves repeatedly targeted. And as we do, we go along to try and do that preventative work and go, look, this is jumping out as here, you're being repeatedly targeted. The X percentage of our shoplifting offences is happening in this store. What can we do jointly to try and reduce that? There were some frustrations there that some of the places that were really getting targeted were either unable or unwilling to make some changes to shop layouts, for example, or certain practices within the shops, because they were part of a national national shop set up, and I don't have the power to do that, and I have to follow the example that's set. All the stores are the same, etc., etc. That can be quite frustrating for us, because we can see why some of these things are happening, what's making it easy for some of these things to happen, and yet we're giving advice there, and sometimes it's not being followed. But we were doing a lot of work on that, through the local community officers in terms of our kind of crime prevention work as well. What I would say in relation to the Wigtown area, we've actually tried to renew and reinvigorate, if you like, the shop relay scheme. There were some problems with that. It was an ageing scheme in terms of the radios and the actual technological way that these radios linked together and linked into our CCTV operators and the local officers. We acknowledged that. We went away, did a lot of work. There's a significant amount of effort went into that to trying to reinvigorate that scheme with assistance from the council, I should say, and to look to try and expand that even beyond Stranraer into into Mid Galloway or the Stuartry towns as well. That's helped a bit, I think, if I'm being honest. I think the staff have got more faith in the scheme. They find it more dependable. They seem to be getting a bit better at using it as well. I think raising awareness as we did with a lot of the shop staff in terms of what they could do in terms of simple preventative actions, if you like. And I'm not talking about this is ranging from just a positioning of yourself within the store can have an actual market effect on where you do what you do and how obvious you make it that you're watching somebody, right up to the actual making a proactive attempt to intercept somebody, to stop and question and confront them because you suspect them doing something. So we're actually not too bad, I think, in terms of where we're heading in that direction. We're giving that kind of training to shop staff, shop managers, and installing that wee bit of confidence in them. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out, because as you would expect, the next set of figures, lockdowns had a significant effect on that, because when either shops weren't open or when shops were open, you were tending to see some of the bigger stores, your Tesco's and Morrison's and that, security staff were in where they might not have had security staff before. So it'll be interesting to see. You might not get a true flavour of whether that's a sustained long-term drop until after the kind of lockdown thing evens itself out a wee bit. But any drop's welcome, because, as I say, it was going up. It was proving to be quite a challenge. What we did find at the same time as well, and that's one of the things we tried to do, was that rather than being an epidemic amongst different people committing shoplifting offences. What we tend to find in this area is a lot of those figures are made out with a small number of just basically recidivists. They're absolute prolific offenders. It doesn't matter what you do with them and how you try to address it. They're just going through a revolving door system or going to court. Sometimes getting a jail sentence, sometimes not getting a jail sentence, back out and just committing more and more shopliftings. You're going to get a small hardcore of that where it doesn't matter what you do, you're never going to stop a selection of that. So again, when we were talking earlier on about the figures come down to a sort of base level, if you like, we're never going to achieve perfection here. We just aren't. But that wee drop's certainly welcome. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out over the longer term.
Thanks for that, Stuart. It would be useful if the report included either the divisional or national trend figure as well. That would allow fair comparison to be made with the local statistics.
Yep, again, I'll feed that back in. As I say, in terms of the national one, as I say, that's maybe a wee bit harder to grab. The divisional figures, as in the regional figures, are obviously they come in terms of the scrutiny report as well, which is there, and we'll kind of cover that as well. But again, as I say to Councillor Hagman, I'll feed that back in. The makeup of the report is not something that I have any control over, I'm afraid. But I'll certainly feed your point back in.
Thanks, Stuart.
Hey, Steve. Thanks very much, Stuart, for what was an excellent report, and thanks for your time.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
And before I go any further, could I do a wee bit of tidying up of some paperwork? I was supposed to remind the members that this meeting has been recorded, and the recording will be made available on Council website for public listening. Better late than never. We have item 5, Scottish Fire and Rescue Services.
Excuse me, sorry, Chair, can we just agree the recommendations for item 4, please?
Sorry, Claire.
Can we just agree the recommendations for item 4 before moving to item 5? Thank you.
Item 4, agree the recommendations. Item 5, Scottish Fire and Rescue Services, Wigtown area. Who's doing the report?
Chair, we have Station Commander Joe Shepherd available on Teams.
Right, can we go ahead? Somebody save me.
I think we're waiting on Station Commander Joe Shepherd from the Fire Service.
Is he not there yet?
Hello, it's Joe Shepherd here. Can you hear me now? It's Joe Shepherd here. I'm here to present the report. Along with me, I've got Watch Commander Susan Maxwell, who leads up our community action team. And between us, hopefully, we'll be able to answer any questions you've got and give context to the report. If you can bear with me a couple of minutes, I'll just pull out a few highlights from the report and then obviously answer any questions you've got or take note of any questions and get back to you.
Thank you.
Well, we feel the report's a fairly positive one. You'll see from the report we have had an overall reduction of 4% in total incidents, with certain areas reducing quite considerably. Which we'll come to. One of the main points I feel in the report is where one of our focuses is accidental dwelling fires. We've seen a decrease for the 4th year in running on accidental dwelling fires. That still sort of shows that Stranraer and the Rins is still the most likely place per head of population to have a domestic dwelling fire. Now, demographics and the things like that influence that. The type of incidents are mostly due to cooking and mostly relating to older people. So we are working very hard with the community action team to make sure that we're speaking to these people, giving advice and giving support where required. It is good to note that over the reporting period, we only had one casualty, which was due to minor injuries, and that which is a positive, as in it shows that we're home fire safety visits, making sure people have got smoke alarm, giving advice, is raising the alarm early, which minimises damage and reduces injury to people, which is what we've been seeing for the last few years. Again, we've had no fatalities due to fire. Unfortunately, just after the reporting period, we did have one fatality in Stranraer, which will form obviously the next report. But that was very unfortunate, which I'm sure you're aware of. Unintentional harm, we have seen a slight increase in road traffic collisions from 16 to 22. Numbers are fairly small, but we do continually monitor, and we're involved with the Road Safety Partnership to try and do a preventative work to keep this to a minimum. We have had 4 fatalities from all were special service type incidents. Two from RTCs, unfortunately, both close to Newton Stewart, which is very unfortunate incidents, and 2 from premises where we gained access for the ambulance service. With the special service incidents, we do expect to see an increase in certain types of special services, such as assisting other agencies and working with the community, and that is a positive reflection of the role the fire service is moving into, working with different agencies and corresponding with ambulance services and assisting people in the home. So we are expecting to see an increase in other types of incidents apart from road traffic collisions, which come under the special service banner. That is this year, and there isn't really any rhyme and reason around this. I think it's just been a quiet year. The special services, apart from road traffic collisions, did reduce quite considerably. But like I say, over the few years, we are seeing an increase in this type of work, and we would expect to see that and call it a positive, because we're getting more and more involved with people in the communities. The other highlight I would like to bring out is unwanted fire alarm signals. We've seen a slight increase over the reporting period. We did have an issue with schools. Stranraer Academy in particular had showed a bit of an increase. We have worked with our prevention and protection team, and we've been working towards this, and I believe there's a brand new alarm system gone into Stranraer Academy since this report has finished, which should deal with a lot of them actions. Unwanted fire alarm signals account for over 50% of incidents for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and there is an awful lot of work nationally and locally trying to minimise that number, because obviously that takes us away from the ability, and it reduces our capacity to do other work that we would like to get involved in the community. That has to be balanced against risk, obviously, because if we basically just turn around and said, oh, we're not coming unless there's a real fire, then that reduces the protection for a certain property, or especially if there's people either sleeping in the buildings or in the buildings. So that has to be balanced with risk. So it is quite a big chunk of work and analysing statistics nationally, but the fire service is looking at it because it is a major part of our workload, and one that we with working with the communities and working with businesses, we hopefully will be able to reduce over time. Over the period, we have again done a lot of work in the communities with home fire safety visits and enforcement, which has managed to keep figures to a reasonably low level. And then just at the end of the reporting period, there was the coronavirus hit us, and we went into lockdown, and this has forced our service to change its practices across the board and to ensure we can deliver a service. And part of that is now obviously operational procedures have changed. We've got a raft of procedures which allow us to attend as we did before and deliver our service, but in a safe manner for staff and to maintain safety of the people that we're serving. And that's also been the same regarding our community safety work. We obviously can't do gatherings in schools and things like that, but we've had to innovate and do it in a different way. And if I could ask Susan just to say a few words about how we've actually innovated and how we're actually trying to deliver the community safety message in the community. Susan? You might need to get a closer.
Can I just check that you can hear me still?
Yeah, it's fine, thank you.
Okay. Obviously, as Station Commander said, my team normally goes out and does a lot of face-to-face work in old people's homes, in schools, other educational establishments, etc. And like you said, with COVID happening, we've had to sort of change all our practices. So what we've done is we've sort of tried to invent our department and still managed to give out the same information, but in different ways. So we've created things like webinars that have went out onto social media about fire safety in the home. Our presentations, for example, bonfire night, we would normally be out in the schools and joining up with our colleagues in the police to go out and speak to children about the dangers. So this year, what we've done is we've created presentations which have went straight to education and have went out to all the primary schools within Dumfries and Galloway for the teachers to give out the same information. With regards to deliberate fire setting, we've done similar things for the likes of the Douglas Ewart High School and Stranraer Academy for information for them. We also have quite an extensive list of people on our home fire safety request list. We've got probably about maybe 60 or 70 from Wigtownshire. Every high risk is still being prioritised to get a physical visit from either my team or for station commanders, operational personnel. But every person who is on the list, whether they be medium risk or low risk, has been contacted at least twice by my department. We've made sure that everybody has got fire protection within the home. We've sent out information and we've given them contact numbers for ourselves to be in touch with. My department is still going out. We're still doing physical checks and visits to people who are the sort of what we call ultra high risk. And we're actually finding out that since COVID, we are getting more vulnerable person reports that are coming in, being highlighted by operational personnel, which I think is really, really excellent. And of course, we're still handing out our deep fat fryers, our flame retardant bedding, and working with lots of the different partners in a slightly different way, but still, I think, as well as we used to do. I'll hand you back to the station commander unless there's any questions.
Okay, thanks, Susan. I'd just like to finish by, and I always like to do this at the end of my reports, because as you know, all the fire officers in Wigtownshire are part-timers, so they've all got a full-time job, and the fire service is just an extra that they do to make sure that we've got a fire service in our community. So I'd just like to emphasise the commitment shown by our staff, both during the reporting period when we were working as we would say in a normal way, and through this COVID period that we're in now, and basically through the professionalism and the flexibility, we are managing to deliver the same level of operational cover and prevention work that we did before, but just in a slightly different way. So it's just really to make a note of that the staff that we've got in Wigtownshire are to be proud of. That's the end of my report. Thank you very much. I would like to open up to any questions from the floor.
Yeah, thanks very much. Any members want questions? David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just again, once again, thanks for the report. On page 32, item 310, it mentions that recruitment is challenging. Just exactly how challenging is it to recruit retained firemen in Wigtownshire?
The main areas where we have our challenge are recruiting at Wigtown and Drumore stations. Obviously, they're very rural. There isn't a tremendous lot of employment in the area, and we are finding it a real challenge to recruit people. And what we were intending to do in in the Wigtown area was expand out to some of the smaller villages. Traditionally, we would just take people from Wigtown when they came forward. As working practices have changed, that's becoming increasingly difficult. So we are looking to sort of spread our wings a little bit and sort of recruit from the likes of Sorby, Isle of Wigtown, Garliston, and outlying sort of country areas within a sort of up to about probably a 7 or 8 minute response time. Traditionally, we would only allow a 5-minute response time, but if you can imagine, if we can get a fire engine moving within 8 minutes, and that keeps that fire appliance available, that is much better than waiting for 25 minutes for Newton Stewart to appear and that fire appliance not being available because we can't recruit staff. And Drumore is a very, very similar situation, if not even more difficult. The positives we've had in Drumore is I think that being a volunteer station, the commitment's not quite as daunting as the part-time, as the RDS, and we have had a few people coming forward. Wigtown remains a challenge. The two stations, Newton Stewart and Stranraer, we tend not to have an issue because we've got a much bigger population base to draw from. So it's continually a challenge. I've been doing this job now for 12 years, and it was a challenge 12 years ago, and it's certainly not getting any easier, especially on smaller population centres.
Yeah, can I come back to you? Thank you, Joe. So, you know, how short are we at Wigtown, or do you have a full complement and both Wigtown and Drumore? Do you have a full complement at both stations at the moment, or are we short of 2 or 3? And if that's the case, you know, below what level is it unoperable as a fire station?
We're sort of target. If you can imagine, a person would provide us with 100% cover. We look for 1,000% cover for a one station, a one pump fire station. So we're looking basically for 10 people that can give us a mix of daytime cover through the week, weekend cover, and evening cover. Now that's very difficult to achieve if you've got a job outside of Wigtown, obviously, and everybody's got a life. We don't expect everybody to be available all the time. So we could take on an extra 3 people at Wigtown, and so we are sitting 3 below what I would class as we're full establishment at Wigtown. And like I say, we are active. We've got 1 person going through the recruitment process at the moment, but we are actively, constantly trying to recruit, and we're looking at ways to try and, I think as a service, we've got a similar issue right across Scotland. So like the service is looking at sort of national campaigns. We are looking at local campaigns. We're a bit restricted, as in we pretty much poster and use social media to get the word out there. The press are sometimes very good with us and run items for us through the newspapers, but it's limited what we can do to get into everybody's living room, if you see what I mean. For instance, in Wigtown, we did an open evening. We put a leaflet in every child's school bag through Wigtown Primary School, just to attract people. We had planned to go out, like I said, into the wider community to make sure people were aware that even if you lived in Sorby and you were 5 miles or 4 miles away, you could still apply. That was kind of stopped by coronavirus, unfortunately. But so we are short at Wigtown at the moment, and we are short at Drumore. We've got a complement of 5 at Drumore with 1 person coming in, so that'll take us up to 6 by the end of the year. Again, we would be looking for 10 to get us up to a full complement at Drumore. The viability side of things is every fire appliance has to have 4 people as a bare minimum. So effectively, you could have 4 people working on that station, and at some point you would have an available fire resource. But obviously, if 1 person drops off because they're on holiday or sick or whatever, that means that appliance is unavailable. So we do report on a monthly basis about percentages of availability. And again, a tribute to Wigtown Fire Station. They are, on a monthly basis, they are producing over 90% availability. which is an absolute tribute to how committed they are to keeping that fire appliance available. What we will do is, if we do have a problem where fire appliances drop off, we will move fire appliances around to make sure there's strategic cover. Where ideal will be every fire station 100% of the time is sitting available. In reality, would show that that's not achievable, and whether that is because people have lives as well as work for the fire service. So it's a goal that I think we'll never achieve. Newton Stewart and Stranraer, because there's more people on their stations, they always have a fire appliance available. And the 4 years that I've been here, they have never ever shown as not available at all, apart from if they're at a different incident, if you see what I mean. So we are very viable as a service, but we definitely have. We would definitely encourage people from the Wigtown area and Dromore area to come forward and ask about a job in the fire service. It's not for everybody, but the opportunities we provide as far as training and the sort of skills people gain working for the fire service do have transferable use in society and for other jobs. I think it's a great thing to put on your CV that you're a part-time firefighter, and obviously you are giving back to your community. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Sorry, Joe. It's a bit of a concern, and that we're short at Dromore and Wigtown and these rural stations. Over the last year, have there been instances where those stations have not been able to turn out then? Yes.
To be fair, like I said, aspirationally, we would have a fire appliance available 100% of the time, which obviously means all the time. Realistically, when we aren't provide, they are part timers on a retained duty system sort of rota, so they have a minimum hours that they commit to providing that they get compensated for financially, and but they have got lives. They work for to make a living. They have to work for other people. They've got to go and get shopping. They deserve holidays. They've got family commitments. So there is occasions where these appliances will not be available. And like I say, the service will obviously monitor this constantly, minute by minute, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if it becomes an issue, we will move fire engines around to make sure the strategic cover. But with the best will in the world, I couldn't put my hand up and say that every fire appliance, especially the more rural ones, are available 100% of the time.
Okay, thanks for that, Joe. I do appreciate that it must be a really difficult situation in these rural stations. Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks very much for that, Joe. Can I bring in Katie now, and then I'm going to try and bring it to an end.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to offer my thanks.
Thank you.
Can I say thanks very much to the Fire Chief and his assistant for an excellent report today. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, before you go, can we agree the recommendations? Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about the rest of you, so I'm going to take a 10-minute break for a coffee. I see it's been brought in, so I suggest we take the opportunity. think that's fine. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we can resume. We're now on item 6, which is the land car park, Church Street, Kirkcombe, proposed asset transfer. And this is Kerry. You've left us, Kerry.
I'm here. I just need to make apologies. They have just started banging at the window and doing some refurb works outside. I have asked if they'd move on, so apologies for the background noise. The purpose of this report is for members to consider Kirkcombe Development Trust's business plan, as detailed in Appendix 2, for the community asset transfer of the land car park at Church Street, Kirkcombe. Also to consider the options available to our council as detailed in paragraph 3.23 and agree the preferred option for those listed, at paragraph 3.23 to recommend to the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee. Happy to take any questions.
Members? Please. Members, any questions? Oh, sorry, Rose. I don't know how I missed you.
Sorry, Tommy, I can't hear you very well.
I said
Oh, that's all right, I can hear you now. Use sign language.
It's my fault for not putting the microphone on. I again apologise. Could I just give an apology for every time I don't do it and save me? Right.
Yeah.
So, Rose.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a very detailed and a lot of hard work has obviously gone into the asset transfer request, and I think the committee or the people that are putting forward this proposal, there've been a lot of changes in personnel and a lot of sort of toing and froing regarding the hall. But I do think that the issues with the car park in Kirkcombe are that the actual car park itself is in a terrible state of disrepair. It hasn't had any attention for years. And the garages that are supposedly giving an income haven't given an income for many years. There's only 2 that I think are even identifiable as to who the owners are or even occupied, and the rest are all tumbling down. So I think that I would support this application, and I would go for option 1 on page, is it 50 or 60? 50. Thank you.
Willie Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, I think the application, sorry.
Willie Scobie?
The application, I think, is skewed, if you like, and I can't think of another word to describe it in terms of the interest being shown by BT as the community made the same interest in coming forward and put that 50,000, a price of 50,000 on it. And then if we look at the report, the DV terms or the value put on it is estimated at around £80,000. I would have serious concerns as to the interest being shown in terms of community interest, and I see it more reflected in the application for the asset transfer. This particular car park, notwithstanding what Ross has said, is in a deplorable state, but it is extensively used by the community when there is an event on in the hall. And if the council were to sell it under option 2, not to recommend it, then I would have some concerns as to what it could be used and taken away for the community. So in that respect, and we do see in 3.21, it has suffered neglect over many years, going back to 2014, that the council has not attended to it. And I think it goes back to, it was once owned by the school, when it was the schoolhouse that was adjacent to it. So in respect of the recommendations, I would put forward option 1, as Ross has, I think, already moved, and the benefits outweigh the de-benefits in respect of community use, access to back properties. Hopefully the trust will come around to, and they refer to one workshop, it's got potential for a lot more of community benefit in terms of how they develop it. There would still be a charge to the BT, so there could be a source of income to the community to develop many of their ideas. So I do see this as a real community asset to not only maintain what is already there, but the potential to develop. So I would support Ross if she's moving it in seconding that, based on the benefits outweighing the de-benefits in terms of community interest.
So we have a mover and a seconder. Could I just ask at this stage, the land itself, the car park, which has been mentioned, is not in the best of condition. Does the council have to put it into order before the actual sale goes through? I'm looking at you, Kerry.
Yep, sorry, I was on mute there. No, the land would be as is. Now, the community themselves have looked at refurbishing the land with some funding that they have access to, so making good some of the larger potholes as a first stage in their development. From my understanding, there's no need for the council to do any work to the land.
So we could actually be selling something in a dangerous condition.
There is no known necessarily dangers posed. It is in disrepair. It is untidy. As stated in the report, there's not been maintenance done on the land, but there's no significant danger posed to members of the public at this stage.
Any other members? David?
Just a quick one. I think that would be a concern to me here is I understand that the hall is going to cost an exorbitant amount of money to bring it back into use or to make it a decent community asset again. However, if this car park gets transferred, then the hall itself will be in council ownership, but the car park won't. So that would devalue that asset, the hall itself, in as much as it's a large building with no parking or very little parking on the outside. So I don't know whether there needs to be an agreement drawn up during the asset transfer process that that car park would still be available to the council if they still have the hall in council ownership.
What about that, Kerry?
So there is other car parking space outside the hall that is to the front of the hall. The car park itself sits at the back, above and at the back of the hall. So it's not quite adjacent to the hall. There's a private property in between, and there's also some parking space at the front of the hall. So there would be some space available. Obviously, as a community asset, the community themselves are looking at. Obviously, the original asset transfer request was for the expression of interest was submitted for the hall and the car parking space. Obviously, that's not been feasible, so they're looking at developing a building on the opposite side of the car park on the opposite side of Church Street, which would be a community facility. And it would be intended that probably 90% of the activities that previously were carried out in the hall would be carried out within that new facility, which means that the community trust would at some point not continue their lease with the hall, and the hall would return to Dumfries and Galloway Council.
Yeah. Thanks, Kerry. I think our mayor should have declared an interest at the start, because I parked my car there on a Thursday night and we do our surgeries. Any other members?
Chair, can I just come back on that then? So, there is car parking, but would it be adequate for an event that's going to be held in the hall if it's still going to be a community asset? Or are there only 4 or 5 parking spaces? You know, I don't have any objection to community asset transfers like this. I think it's great to see communities coming in and taking charge of facilities like this. But I'm just wondering whether there might be closer working between the council and the community group with a view to a complete asset transfer, whether it's feasible that, you know, the hall and the car park, something could be worked, because I'm just concerned that there would be a conflict and a devaluation of the hall as an asset if it loses all that parking space. So I don't know whether we need to be considering some sort of agreement that's built into the asset transfer for the car park, or even trying to work more closely with that group with a view to supporting them to get the hall into the asset transfer package.
Work has been done with the group over some time, and it was a very difficult decision that they made to redact their original expression of interest, which included the hall. Obviously, they took a lot of time to investigate it and to see whether it would be feasible for the community. So they have made an agreement that they just wouldn't be able to go for an asset transfer to include the hall. However, their objective is to retain the space for the use of the community. So there's no, I don't imagine there'll be any restrictions on communities being able to access that car park and use it should there be events within that hall space. So I don't see there being any issue with regards to accessing that space. However, obviously it's up to yourselves to make recommendations to the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee. So if that's something that you wish to add onto the feedback from this meeting, then that can be done.
I think there needs to be a bit more work done in this, you know, before we just agree that this, in my view, that the car park is asset transferred as a separate item to the hall. You know, I'm not saying that we shouldn't give that agreement. What I'm saying is that it should be perhaps conditional on looking at the hall and what we can do with that hall, because if that hall is left in the council's ownership and that parking area disappears, then we're left with a site on the corner that could turn into another blight on the landscape.
Did you want to come in? Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Is there a guarantee of access, rear access, for the neighbouring householders, and also access for BT to the telephone exchange?
Yes, it's stated in the report that although currently there's no legal access rights for the residents in the main street, there is and will continue to be access provided to those residents. The Trust themselves will be negotiating directly with BT should the transfer go ahead, and obviously they've stated that they would be looking to receive an income from BT for the land.
I think, Chair, it is important that legal access actually be written in here.
Yeah, Jim. Willie, and then we'll move to the motions.
Give way to David, his hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. Okay, if we assume that car park goes out of council ownership and they build a community facility that caters for the type of stuff that's normally done in the hall, we're left with a facility which is a large facility, and if it was ever to be sold and renovated, would have very little parking space. You know, so I don't know whether my main concern here is that the hall itself is going to be left in council ownership with very little use, no money being spent on it, and it becomes a dilapidated area. So I'm just flagging it up that it might be, at this point, it would be a good point to try and get some sort of collaboration between the council and the trust to look at the hall again.
What we have in the report with the creation of the community hub and all that would contain would be nowhere near big enough to hold events. So the hall would still be required, and it's extensively used by the community, or was, before COVID-19. The car parking space that Andrew referred to, there are about 5, one with a disabled car parking, but nothing near to what would be required when there is an event on in the hall. So I think it's logical that there should be some collaboration between the council and the development trust to make sure that there's car parking space available, and make that a condition of transfer, that we want to see a retention of part of the car park for the purposes of the village hall and the community hub that they refer to. Being an asset, I would hope that there is a change of mind in the council, that they do see community halls as an asset to the community, and stop looking always to find savings from them. So in that respect, the village hall is essential. It's a part of the community as well as the development that we see in this application. I do see more benefit in transferring to the community rather than commercial enterprise or private sector, and in that respect there's more benefit to there being, what do they call it, disbenefits. So in that respect, you know, we could build that into the motion, depending on what Ross says, that we would want to retain the part of the car parking but still allow them to develop.
Thanks, Willie. Rose.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I do appreciate the conversation regarding access and allowing parking to continue. I do think, however, that the Trust are very clear that they do not wish to have any responsibility for the hall. It actually states the amount of money that it would take, because it's the gable end is actually bulging, and there's a question of the safety of the hall at the moment. Now, Kerry, I don't know if you can correct me on this, that I'm not suggesting the hall has been condemned in any way, but I think there have been extensive surveys regarding the cost to make the hall usable. The supper room upstairs is not accessible, so as soon as you start to renovate the hall, you would come under the Disability Access Act. There's legislation to say that you have to make the supper room accessible. So it's not just the bulging wall, and the balcony as well is unsafe. So I think the community have had extensive meetings about the hall, and it is a really sad thing to see that asset not go into the hands of the community. But I think they're very clear that that would be a massive burden to them at this time. And with the amount of usage, the money, I think it's between £700,000 and £900,000 to get the hall sort of shipshape, is a massive burden to them. So I still think we should go with option one, and I'm really happy to say, can we add something about the parking? What they are doing when there are events that are bigger than the other facility can accommodate, they are looking at the use of marquees in the car park, and they're looking at the use of the school and They did an incredible survey and research about how many events would be too big, you know, for the other facility, and it's about 1 a year or maybe 2 a year. So they are working together to look at alternative ways of accommodating that.
Just before I bring David in, could I ask Kerry, some time ago I went to a meeting in Kirkham in the hall, and it was the early days of the talk of the asset transfer. But it was agreed then by the council that they would put the building into a sound condition, which to me means wind and watertight and safe. Has that changed?
No, the work was done in the building. I don't have the detail at hand. Work was carried out in the building to ensure that it was wind and watertight. There has been some ongoing issues with regards to the old chimney stacks. Now, I'm led to believe that that's been rectified. External structural engineers that have carried out work for the trust have concerns about some structural elements to do with beams. Now, the council has looked into that, and there is no significant. They don't believe there's significant issues at present on that. The building hasn't been declared unsafe, and it's still in use at present.
David, sorry, Andrew, then David. Don't start trying.
Yeah, you know, when we look round our Wigtownshire area, and you look at Creetown and Wigtown in particular, and the amount of money that's been levered into Wigtown, if you look at Wigtown, you know, over £500,000 to renovate the new town hall. No, I think it's actually over £1 million and £500,000 to renovate the Grapes building. Third sector organisations have access to funding that we don't have as a council. So if this is left in our hands, then, and as Ross has stated already, the likelihood is that there will only be one event within the hall within the year. So if it's not being used, it's going to run down. We're not going to be in a position to spend a lot of money on it. So we're going to have to put it in the market and try and sell it. You know, I think there's an opportunity here to work in partnership with the Trust and see whether there is some way that the hall can be funded, you know, and built into the business plan that goes along with the car park, rather than just hiving off the area of the car park and leaving that building in council ownership on the main street. You know, the third sector organisations especially, and I think it will be a listed building. I could be wrong there, but I think it's a memorial hall. Anyway, irrespective of whether it is or not, you know, the likelihood is that a proper business plan and applications to funders will be successful in bringing that building back up to standard and back into use. Now, it would be easy at this present moment in time simply to hand away the car park, but I think the car park is probably a major asset assigned to the hall. So I think we need to consider that.
Thanks, David. Can I have Katie, then Rose? Sorry, Andrew, left you again.
Thank you, Chair. So I've been listening carefully to the debate on this one, and I'm looking at page 77, which has got the sort of outline plan. So we're discussing the hall and we're discussing the car park, but I think we have to bear in mind that we've not got any proposal in front of us regarding the hall. So for us to base our decision on information that's not before us, I think leaves us in a very vulnerable position, shall I say. And certainly, I guess, as a simple point of clarification, the hall, as I look at it, is a separate entity to the car park. Now, I'm looking, there appears to be two separate plots between the hall and the car park. And I don't know, I'm assuming that those are in private ownership. They're not in the council's ownership. And certainly, I'm really concerned that we are tying the community to an asset that they have said that they don't wish to take forward. And it's not within our gift as a local authority to say, well, you can have that, but only on these with this attached as such. They have come to us with a request for an asset transfer, and we have to base our decision on the information that's before us. They've quite clearly said that they're not wanting to take on the hall, and so therefore I'm happy to support Councillor Surtees' motion of transferring option 1 for the car park. What I think we do need to bear in mind with is if we refuse this and the council receives an offer for the car park, the council would be at liberty to sell the car park as is and leave no community provision in terms of the hall. So if we were to look at it from the other point of view, I do not know whether, and I can't answer, I'm not about to second guess what would happen in that situation, but I think we just have to be very mindful that the decision we make is based on the information we've got before us, and the information we've got before us is the community have requested the car park to be attached. So I would happily support option 1 as Councillor outlined at the start of this debate. Thank you.
Thank you. It was Ross.
Yeah, actually, Katie's covered some of the points that I want to make. The community have already got the money to purchase the other facility, and I think if we refuse this asset transfer, it actually would damage, potentially it would damage them going forward, and using that facility to the benefit of the community. And I think Katie's right that the hall is not in front of us today. And David, I do agree that we need to discuss the hall, but I don't think we should burden the community who've worked so hard to get where they have on that particular issue.
Katie, I think we've also got to remember that we do not make the decision. We're only here to bounce off the ideas of and then give our recommendation to the parent committee. So I wouldn't worry too much about the final decision. It doesn't lie with us. Andrew.
Thank you, Joe. Much of what was going through my head has been already said by other councillors. The whole is a quagmire of issues in itself, and I think it would be difficult for us to attach the whole onto this car park because they are separate entities altogether. And in front of us we've got a car park and a community who are interested in taking over this property, and they've got an ambition and a vision, and I think we are here to help them achieve that ambition and vision, just like we did in Glenluce. So I would be happy to support option 1 here.
I think members, everybody said a go about this. We have a motion on the table and a seconder. If the motion could be...
Keep it on, Tom.
We have a motion and a seconder on the table. Can you tell us what they are, Claire?
Thank you, Chair. We have a motion proposed by Councillor Surtees, seconded by Councillor Scobie to go with option 1 and your recommendation to Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee.
Happy to give way on to the second, and I'm no precious about seconding it. I'm supporting it, but I'm no precious if somebody else is precious in seconding it.
Obviously, there's no amendments, so there'll be no details of who proposed or
Jim,
seconded.
you wanted to say something?
Thanks, Chair. I would be quite happy to support option 1 on the understanding that established rights of car parking and access are retained.
I actually don't know if that would be a possibility, but maybe somebody could let us know. Kerry?
Hi, it wouldn't. I don't have that information at present, but if you wish to make that recommendation to the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee, they would be the committee that make that decision.
Okay, Jim.
Chair, I would be happy to make that amendment to option 1.
We have an amendment. Do seconder to the amendment?
Chair, you want to add it to the recommendation?
Yes.
Chair, that would need to be built in to the recommendation. If you look at the report, that has to be as part of the benefits. So you need to make a case for it. So that would already have to be built in, that these are the benefits that it would be. A car park, it would have back access, I already said that, and I'm happy to have that as a condition. And still allow for the trust to develop but retain car parking as an integral part of that piece of ground. So it's already there and built in. I don't think it's up to you, Chair, whether there's a need for an amendment. We need to build the case in going forward with a recommendation, but ultimately it'll be for the procurement committee.
I think, Chair, in that case, we seem to be agreed in this.
Well, we certainly seem to be agreeing option one. Are you happy to go forward with this as a recommendation for the car parking?